Are we in a financial crisis? The government says, trust us, we have a plan. The world's most important financial institution, the IMF, isn't convinced, and neither are many of the government's own MPs. Tonight, we're in the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution and also the biggest urban economy outside London, Manchester, specifically in the region of Higher Blakely, which has been an area of Labour dominance for as long as I've been alive. Tonight, it might not surprise you, we'll be discussing the events of the last few days, and you might want to hang on for a surprise question at the end. Welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, from the government, we have Paul Scully. He was reappointed to his role as Minister at the Department for Levelling Up, Housing, Communities and for London. He originally backed Nadhim Zahawi for PM, but later switched to support Liz Truss. One of Labour's rising stars, Bridget Phillipson, was elected to Parliament at only 26. Last year, she spoke for the party on Treasury matters and now shadows education. Anne McElvoy is executive editor of The Economist magazine, which today said, "This is the worst start to a new administration in history and the government has shredded its own reputation," and also hosts the Economists Asks podcast. Lord Karan Bilimoria is an independent peer in the House of Lords. He founded Cobra Beer over 30 years ago, a company he still chairs. He also finds the time to be Vice President of the CBI, which represents nearly 200,000 UK businesses. And Richard Bacon has presented a huge number of popular TV and radio shows, including a youth version of this very programme. Now based in LA, he's co-creator of This Is My House, and for National Geographic, once hiked across Yosemite National Park with Barack Obama. Welcome to our panellists, welcome to our audience here in Higher Blakely. Great to see you. And of course, welcome to you at home. We always aim to get a wide range of views on this programme, not only from our panel, but also from our audience here. As you know, because you've been through the process, you are selected mainly to represent the electoral picture at the last election, but we also take into account sustained changes in polling and local council election results as well. It's great to see you here. And for you at home, do join in the conversation in the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time. Let's hear what you've got to say. OK, let's take our first question tonight, which is from Karen Hunter.
Is Liz Truss and her Chancellor peddling fantasy economics, as stated by Rishi Sunak during the leadership campaign?
Paul Scully.
No, absolutely not. Look, I think what we found is that...
Paul, just take a moment to hear the response you got.
No, I know. Let me explain why. Because Liz Truss and Kwasi, the Chancellor, were speaking to Ofgem, the energy companies, as well as financial institutions throughout the summer, and they were training exactly what they were going to be doing now, and we found we had to act, because Ofgem were saying that a typical household would be paying up to £6,000 on their energy bills over the next year or so. And so we absolutely had to act. So that's why we brought in the energy price guarantee, which limits that for a typical household to £2,500. But we have to go further than that, because we need to make sure that the economy can grow. There's no way we can just have more of the same, tax your way out of a relatively stagnant economy and tax your way out of the pressures that we have on our cost of living, wider than energy.
So are you happy with the way things have gone since Friday?
Well, look, things have been really difficult. They've clearly been difficult because we saw the market reaction, and we've seen that the snowball effect from that. This is actually the first financial event of its kind that's been in the maelstrom of social media. It's financial. No. I'm just saying the speed of what's happening. The speed of what's happening, the speed of response is very different from in 2008. So what we have to do now, we have to explain exactly why we are doing what we're doing, exactly what the plan for growth is, because we cannot just, as I say, tax our way out of it with a 70-year high tax rate that we have at the moment. So we have to make sure that businesses have that supply side reform to make sure that we can strip back some regulation, that we can make planning easier, that we can make childcare easier for people to work and take on new businesses, and we can get people to relocate and invest in the UK.
The response that we've seen from the markets is a direct consequence of your government's totally needless and unnecessary tax cuts for the wealthiest. Everyone accepts the need for action on energy bills, although I think the oil and gas companies who are making a killing during this time should be made to contribute towards that. It shouldn't fall just to working people to pick up the bill for all of it. But the direct consequence of that totally unnecessary budget that will see tax cuts for the wealthiest in the middle of a cost of living crisis will mean higher mortgages for people here. It will mean rising prices. It will directly contribute and make the situation worse still. We should get Parliament back. We should recall Parliament and reverse the measures that you put forward.
You're getting 30 million people. You've got 30 million people being able to keep more of their own money with the national insurance.
Hang on a minute.
Their mortgages are about to go up. They're going to pay
insurance levy reversal, which you didn't support that levy in the first place, and you were saying at the time the way you were arguing 6 months ago is the total opposite now. So you're either wrong
time
then,
and again we said you shouldn't load it onto working people, and you did that.
Richard,
I don't think people are going to be richer because of this. When you say it's been really difficult since last week, that does seem like a little bit of an understatement. I think, doesn't it? I think Liz Truss has done more damage to the British economy than Brexit, the war in Ukraine, or the pandemic, and she's done it since Friday. You were meant to be better off because of this. Who here is now more worried about their ability to pay their bills and buy food and their mortgage? Conversely, let's have a show of hands. Who feels more optimistic about the British economy since Friday? Paul, no one.
But hold on a sec, you just asked the question. You said you talk about people being worse off, and you're then asking people how they feel. And I can understand why people are concerned about and worried about the future because of the narrative that we've had over last week.
Hang on a minute. Surely, if you're just looking at... I mean, you've got your hands up because you want to ask questions, so I see what you're doing. But if asked who feels more worried, and I think it was everybody. Yeah. And there are more people who voted Conservative. Wait, let me finish. There are more people who voted Conservative in this audience than for any other party. So this is not a party political thing.
Fine.
Unanimity on people feeling worried, and unanimity on no one feeling.
And I can understand, Fiona, I can understand that. That's why I'm saying we have to explain exactly. First of all, we want to make sure that you can keep more of your money in your pocket. It's not the super wealthy.
Okay. Well, let's hear from people if they think that's working. So the man there in the grey t-shirt.
I'm a mortgage advisor, and in the last week I've seen people's mortgages from last week went from £750 to £1,500.
It's amazing.
And that is replacing the gas crisis, the electricity crisis. It's now being replaced from one to the other. 1,600
mortgage products have been withdrawn from the market.
Well, it's 40% of mortgage products being withdrawn. Now, the woman next to you.
Hi. Yeah, my mortgage has been changed, so it's more expensive now. And I just feel very let down, like all the bankers are getting the bonuses and we're forgotten about.
That is absurd, isn't it? Isn't it?
All right, let's hear a bit more. The woman over there in the corner with the long brown hair. Yes, you.
Liz Truss went round the radio stations today and said nobody will pay more than £2,500 for the gas. And that's not true.
It was typical household.
Average. Well, if she can't get that right, why are we going to trust her?
It's a typical household.
And the man here in the front with the leather jacket and the glasses, yes, you.
Does the gentleman from the government actually believe his own rhetoric?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Look, I wouldn't be here if I'm not, and talking about. I wouldn't be a member of the government if I didn't believe what we were doing is the right thing. I don't do this for the fun of it. I do it because I believe this is best for the country in the medium term. You asked the question at the beginning: is this a financial crisis? The 2008 situation was a financial crisis because that was something that was with us for a decade. As Richard said, this has been since Friday. This has been a market correction. It's been, and we've
so
got.
So it was a direct consequence
we've got an out.
Of the budget then?
Well, no,
not external factors. As you said initially.
If you look at what's happened in Germany today, Germany, their inflation has reached double figures for the first time since the Second World War. They've just pledged 200 billion euros to put into prop up their market.
Do you think this is a kind of global thing?
It is, absolutely.
So let me ask you then, if the Chancellor, because I've heard the Prime Minister and the Chancellor say this as well on the airways, If the Chancellor hadn't stood up and said what he said on Friday, are you saying then this would have happened anyway?
What I'm saying is that...
Because presumably that is...
you would have, look, you would have had £6,000 pounds for a typical household
No,
bill.
I'm not talking about, the effect on... I'm talking about mortgage... No, come on, Paul, you know, we're talking
He's already
about
announced
mortgage
the
products being withdrawn. We're talking about the effect, the fact
So
that the Bank of England has had to basically sell all these bonds, the impact on the markets. You're saying all that would have happened anyway?
Well, look, I think what you find is that we're in a situation where inflation is running high, but it's not a traditional inflation event. Because what typically happens, you get an overheated economy, and that's what causes inflation. We don't have an overheated economy. We have a comparatively sluggish...
You really got it right.
We have a sluggish global economy.
Let me bring...
And with growth not just slow here, but around the Western
Let me
world.
bring... Karen, so let's have you in with your hat on as not only a co-founder of a huge and very successful beer company, but also representing, what, is it 200,000 UK businesses?
The financial crisis was mentioned. Let's just put this into context. At the time of the financial crisis, before then, we had growth of about 2.5% a year as a country. We had interest rates that were an average of about 5%. And then after the financial crisis, 13 years ago, 14 years ago, interest rates have been at virtually zero for all these years that we've got used to. And we've had flatlining of growth. We've had flatlining of productivity. We've not been doing well as an economy at all. Then what happens? From 2016 onwards, we have one uncertainty after another. The word that is bigger than every other word at the moment is uncertainty. With Brexit, which took so long, and that's still not resolved, we've got the Northern Ireland Protocol to sort out. Then you have the pandemic, then you have the Ukraine war, then you have energy costs, and you have inflation, and it's just one thing after another. As a business, how much can you deal with for a prolonged period of time? Now, the government was really good in helping us during the pandemic, £400 billion. Now, you talk about uncosted tax cuts. That was uncosted. That had to be borrowed. Nobody questioned it because we needed it to save jobs, to save the economy, to save businesses, to save our country. And it was one of the best in the world. Now, the pandemic finished in February. Suddenly you say we can't help anymore. Well, the crisis hasn't stopped. The crisis has, in fact, got worse. So what was missing in Friday's announcement was, yes, actually, some of those measures targeting a growth of 2.5%, I'm all for that. Actually, cutting the 2.5% national insurance, 1.25% for employers, 1.25% for employees, that should never have happened in the first place. That's a tax on jobs. That even Labour Party say they would not have done that. Corporation tax, not putting it up to 25%, I believe that hampers inward investment, that hampers growth, it hampers pension funds and investment companies. It's better to be more competitive as a country. So many of the measures that were mentioned Friday were really good. But what did they miss? There was nothing in there to help businesses today. Who's going to pay for the business rates? We had business rates holidays while we were in the pandemic. Who's going to have delaying of taxes? We were allowed to delay our taxes to give us help with cash flow. We had access to government-guaranteed loans. We had so much help in the pandemic that we do not have now. The VAT was cut for hospitality. Those are the measures that are going to help businesses today.
So you want the government to spend even more money?
It's not a question of spending when you have to help. It's the analogy I've always used is the £400 billion, if you play a tennis stroke, you hit the ball. If you stop there, the ball's going to go into the net. You need to follow through to get the ball over the net. And that may cost 100 billion, it may cost 200 billion. But I'd rather we spend some money and save businesses, prevent people going bankrupt, than having a horrible recession. We're already in recession now. We've got to do whatever it takes to save those jobs, because that's the alternative if we don't do it. And here's the other thing. The shock that has happened on Friday is interest rates were always going to go back up to around 5% at some stage. Not in one go. That's devastating for businesses and devastating for consumers. This should have been planned. To do an announcement like Friday without the Office of Budget Responsibility giving an independent forecast that backs it up, that should have been done. Now we've got to wait until the 23rd of November. That's too late. We need to do that right now.
And I'm going to come to you. I just want to hear two more people in the audience. I'll come to you. Yes, come there, and Greg Hardy. Yes, you.
Yeah, Lord Karan interviewed Keir Starmer on Sunday regarding the energy bills. The government's going to freeze them for 2 years. Look, Labour's only do it for 6 months. Can you explain what you're going to do after them 6 months? Because he didn't say anything at all, Keir Starmer, during that interview.
Yeah, so the plan that we've set in place would last for 6 months, and in the run-up to that period, we'd review it and decide what's necessary there.
So
I mean,
what would you review?
we're the opposition, not the government, OK? So we can set out plans for how we get there, but we don't actually get to make those decisions. But I think...
But what you're saying is 6 months is not
government's been
enough.
for 2 years. You
Yeah.
only do it for 6 months. So what are you going to do after 6 months?
Well, in the run-up to that period, we'd review it, we'd take action, we'd do what is necessary. I think the difference in terms of the approach that you're seeing from us relative to the government is that we're not just saying that it should fall to working people to have to pick up that bill. Oil and gas companies, by their own admission, have got more money than they know what to do with. They've made an absolute fortune during the pandemic, and I think it's only right that in those circumstances they make a contribution towards that. That's something the government have rejected, and I think that is the big question. Who pays for all of this? I think we should ask those oil and gas companies to make a contribution.
We've kept the energy there.
Hi. You mentioned that you want people like us to keep more of our money in our pocket. But the reality is, yes, we might have had a small tax cut, but everything is going up. So we're not keeping more money in our pocket. How do you do the maths there? How are you helping us?
OK, let me come to Anne, because Anne's not managed to get a word in yet. Anne.
So,
Anne, let me remind you that... let's respond to what we're hearing from our audience, because there have been so many hands up. And also, let me remind you the main question, which is Liz Truss and her Chancellor peddling fancy economics, as stated by Rishi Sunak?
I think they're peddling flawed economics and flawed politics as well. And I think that is the doom loop that you referred to the Economist now. Very punitive coverage, particularly, of what we must still think of as a mini budget, which is a bit like saying that a hurricane is a slight breeze in the Manchester area. I think the problem that I have with it, and I followed Liz Truss's campaign, I was very interested in the dividing line that she was drawing with Rishi Sunak, and that's, I suppose, where this idea of fantasy or fairy tale economics comes from recently, is she ran as a free marketeer who wants to stimulate growth. Good. She wanted to take on some orthodoxies, to my mind, also good. That's also one reason why, particularly if you have a change of leadership in a party or a change of government, you want to shake things up. You want things to be different and thought of, again, in a different way. But what she didn't seem to take on board was that goes hand in hand with reassurance. So she sort of came in as a free marketeer who didn't understand the markets. And to say, and I'm afraid Paul Scully, I think, has slightly gone down the same road. And Paul, I do actually feel quite sorry for the gig you've got tonight, genuinely, because I think you do believe in a low-tax economy. I think you do believe that we need to stimulate growth. You believe a lot of things that a publication like The Economist would stand for, but I think you can't easily sit there when things are in such chaos and say, here we are free marketeers now running the party. We wanted to take things in a sort of animal spirits, we'll all be gingered up and we'll get the benefits of that. But if the response of both the markets and also political response is so negative, and not just from people who are from the left or would prefer a Labour government, frankly, I'd rather be sitting here, and I hope we get a moment to say, I'm not so sure absolutely about Labour's growth plans. I'd love to know where the Labour growth recipe comes from. But frankly, right now, Bridget Phillipson has a right point here, the government is the government. And if the government can't be more consistent or more reassuring, then it's going to have a big problem. It is certainly, I think, the ropiest start that I have seen from a Prime Minister and Chancellor. Either they learn from that, or it could be a rather short-lived new team indeed.
But that reassurance is all about growth, as I say. First of all, it's personal growth to make sure that we can keep jobs, and that's why the National Insurance Levy, as Karen rightly says, is something to encourage 920,000 businesses to be able to carry on taking people. The investment zones that we announced, Paul,
investment zones are a great idea. These are great initiatives. Yeah. But what about the question that was asked here? You've had tax cuts and the 1p reduction that Rishi Sunak said he'd do before the election in 2024. You brought that forward. Yeah. Great. Well, what about the income tax thresholds? Those thresholds are frozen. If you take inflation into account, that's the most expensive element. That's not been touched.
Isn't it also, though, Paul, in a way, and also to your point, isn't it slightly absurd that in the middle of a cost of living crisis that we've known is coming and people can barely afford to buy shoes for the kids and there's not enough food at food banks? It sounds absurd to say this out loud, but last Friday you reduced the top rate of income tax for rich people and you took away the cap on bankers' bonuses, which the bankers weren't even asking for. Doesn't it just seem wild?
There's clearly in terms of optics, there's always going to be those. There's
Never
never.
mind
There's
optics.
never.
What about just doing it?
Well, let me explain why we did it, and then might give you a bit of context, because there's never a good time to sort of receive that sort of accusation. But the 45% basically top-rated tax, it just does not compete when you look at the US. I think it's 37%. You look at Italy. Look at Norway as a lower top tax rate. So that is
the IMF says that this
growth.
mini budget is going to increase inequality, and one of the reasons is the reduction in the top rate of income tax.
But that's about growth, Richard. That's about growth, that's about growth because it's in making sure.
Are you sure they weren't referring to? Anna's agreeing with me. I think. You sure the IMF was not referring in part to the?
I'm talking about the 45%. Is it all about growth?
Well, I don't think there was a widespread expectation that there would be a cut there. So it seemed to be done for largely symbolic reasons. And you say the optics. Well, the optics were really about why was that such a priority. As it happens, fiscally, I think it's relatively minor given lots of the other things that are happening.
You mean in terms of the difference it will make to the economy?
Of the difference it really makes. But I do think it was an odd time to do it. And in many ways, it strikes me as a budget with all its kind of shock and awe that you could have done straight after Brexit, 2016, and sort of let a lot of things rip. There would have still been arguments. We wouldn't be sitting here agreeing on the panel. But you were coming out of the pandemic. I think a lot of people thought they would be taking higher earners, kind of didn't really expect that they were going to get something else. After that, we felt that we were kind of all in it together a bit. And so I do question the wisdom of that move. I would just say I have something a little bit less good to say about the IMF. Absolutely, as lender of last resort, it's a very important institution. But it does. There was quite a lot of commentary, really, from the IMF on there, which went, I think, beyond where the IMF should be, which was about what the tax rate should be. That is really a question for democracy.
They do help in desperate situations, and that you've got to give them credit for that. But the 40%, by the way, it's a timing, as Richard said.
It's weird.
40%, by the way. Margaret Thatcher, 40%. John Major, 40%. Tony Blair, 40%. Gordon Brown, 40% until just before he lost his election and put it up to 50%. George Osborne didn't have the guts to put it back down to 40% and kept it at 45%. There's a time to get back to the 40%. Not now, I think.
Okay. I tell you what. So we select our questions in this programme based on what you're interested in, the questions you submit and where we think, will provoke the most debate. All of you pretty much asked about this subject. Now, I'm aware we could kind of talk around it all for tie-up. I'm going to try and take different bits to try and sort of break it up a bit, if I may. So let's go to Jamie Crowell. Actually, Jamie, before I do, though, I have to say where we're going to be next week so that people can apply if they want to come along. So, very importantly, let me find it. We are going to be in London next week, and we will have on our panel the Succession superstar actor Brian Cox, as well as Piers Morgan. So, should be interesting. Don't miss that. Oh, there's a little rumble going through the crowd there. And then after that, we're going to be in Musselburgh on the east coast of Scotland, and that's also going to be a great debate. So if you are in the vicinity of London or Musselburgh, you want to be in either of those programmes, go to the Question Time website and apply in the usual way, and we would love to see you. OK, we are going to stay on the business of the last few days, because that's what you all want to talk about. So, Jamie Crowell, where are you? Let's hear your question.
After the effects of the fiscal event on Friday, will first-time buyers ever be able to afford a mortgage?
So, Jamie, I'm assuming you are asking this question, because does this apply to you personally?
Yeah, but, I've been saving for about 4 years. Wow. I feel like Friday was probably the nail in the coffin for me. It has been hard prior to that with house prices are going up, but I feel like Friday was the nail in the coffin, at least for me, in the next 2 years.
Right, OK. I'll be interested to hear from anyone else on this particular subject as well, actually. Bridget.
Yeah, it's a time of real worry, and where it comes to people who already are in the position of owning their own home, and we've already heard the impact that will likely have, but also those of you, like you, who want the chance to buy your own home, and I think people should be able to do that. It's many of us aspire to that and want the opportunity to own our own home. The reality is we don't build enough houses
so
in this country.
How would Labour help? It's someone like Jamie particularly.
Yeah, we need to make it easier to get more houses built, and that applies to both homes to buy, but also homes to rent too. We haven't done that for a very long time as a country. I think, going back to the point around the wider set of priorities that we've seen from the government and how we get growth in our economy, I think the fundamental difference between the approach that I would take and that Labour takes and Paul's approach is that I believe growth in our country comes from the working people of this country, so from the bottom up and the middle out. And you don't generate growth by simply just handing over a tax cut to the very wealthiest. I think it's the people in this room, the teaching assistants, the nurses, the shop workers, the delivery drivers, they are the people that will drive growth. So any plan for growth, it's not trickle down, it's from the bottom up and the middle out. So any plan for growth has to involve investing in our people, investing in their skills and making that transition as well where it comes to the new technologies of the future. Climate change presents us with so many challenges, but it also presents us with so many opportunities to create brilliant jobs right across our country, well paid, highly skilled. That should be the focus of government, not unfunded tax cuts that lead us to a crash on the economy.
Karen, so what can we say to Jamie? Will first-time buyers like Jamie ever be able to afford a mortgage now? Because in the short, right now, you're thinking you can't. Sorry, let's hear what you're going to say.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to get a new house by the time I'm 30, so that's 2 years. I just feel at the moment I'm trapped in like a rent cycle, and yeah, it's not going to happen realistically now, especially with like energy bills are going up.
Well, also the government has taken action on it.
Yeah, and to be fair, like they have, but it's everything else that is going up as well. Like rent is going up as well.
So you're not feeling better off?
I'm feeling a lot better off.
So the aspiration to own your own home, I mean, I still remember when my wife and I bought our first home, how we struggled to get that deposit amount and then to get our first. It's one thing we've got to encourage. What's happened, it's actually gone down because house prices have gone so much that it's impossible just to even get on the ladder. And here you were nearly on the ladder, and now interest rates are just rocketing up.
And mortgage products being withdrawn,
and people with existing mortgages, those if you've got a 2.29%, it may run out next year. It may run out in 2 years, and then it'll shoot up by 4%, 5%.
Banks will say, "Can you meet the higher interest rate before they'll lend you any money?"
But again, to give the government credit, in this announcement on Friday, they did say they would make house building easier. But let's see the action on it. We need hundreds of thousands more houses per year. Let's build them. We talk about the green revolution. We can make small modular nuclear reactors. Rolls-Royce have the technology. They can build them within 5 years. Each one can power the city the size of Sheffield. We haven't even started building one. Let's get on and build them. That'll create jobs. That'll deal with the climate.
Yes. So in addition to being more difficult to buy your first home, actually selling your home, I'm finding, is difficult at the moment. So Paul, this is one for you really. In light of the cladding crisis that's ongoing at the moment, our insurer has actually demanded £250,000 from 52 leaseholders by the end of this month, which is an impossible ask. I'm just wondering, what are the government doing to stop these profiteering companies? Is this part of helping the rich over the leaseholders of the country? Or?
Now, Paul, I'm going to come back to you to answer that specifically. I'm just going to go around the audience a bit more, if that's all right. The woman in the front there in the glasses.
Hi, Paul, this is for you again. I mean,
feel free to ask me on the panel as well, to say in the interest of balance.
I mean, I have dyscalculia, which is mathematical dyslexia, but even I know that 5% cut for somebody earning over £150,000 is worth more to them than a penny for somebody earning a lot less. And the cut for the people earning a lot less is not going to happen till April next year, but the 5%'s gone right now. So you're saying that you want us to have more money in our pockets, but I mean, Ofgem, we're going to increase the rates by, I think, about 178%. You've stepped in as a government and said, oh, no, that won't happen, but they're still going up by about 96%. That's a massive increase for people like me and people on this panel. How can Jamie over there get a new house when he's got to think about the cost of living, the cost of food, the cost of rates, everything? It's not working.
OK. Again, I will come back to you. I'm just going to try and get round the audience a little bit. The woman there with the hand, you've got with a sweater on. Yes, you, yeah. Yes.
Is now the time for the Chancellor to move the main budget further forward? to move it to the next few weeks, and hopefully it should be better thought out.
What you mean in terms of because at the moment we're expecting a statement on the 23rd of November, and so you're asking should it be brought forward? Okay. The question that we've been asking is about mortgages. Has anyone got anything here to say about mortgages in particular? Yes, we've got a couple there. The one there in the white headscarf. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to know what the plan is for mortgages, because I was actually in the process of getting a mortgage as a young person, and I was told my initial interest rate would be 4.5%. And I was told today that the lender has pulled that offer, and now the best offer that I can get is about 10.5%.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're saying that, you know, you need to immediately look at sort of putting your application through, because if you don't, the lenders may even pull these offers. And for me now, as a first-time buyer, I mean, I don't think I can now afford to get a mortgage.
Friday?
Yes, yeah.
So let's just hear a bit more about that, because that's an extraordinary
So I was given
jump.
this initial rate about 2 weeks ago. So we were in the process of getting all the documentations together, making sure everything is correct, ID and all of those things. And today I was told, you know, the lenders are pulling those offers. Those offers are no longer there.
And are they giving you any? What are they saying to you as to why they're doing that?
So they're just saying that the lenders are pulling the offers. That's it. They haven't said anything else. And they said now the best offer that we have is about 10.4%.
Wow. Right.
Does that make you uncomfortable, Paul,
Which, as a first-time buyer, I mean, you can imagine it's almost you can't do it. Like you have to think from 4.5% to 10.4% is a drastic increase.
And are you being given any hope that if you just sort of sit tight for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, I don't know, that actually it will settle down, you'll be back to an offer that you might be able to afford?
Not really. I mean, given that we're in a recession now, I don't think that can happen for the next couple of years at least. So.
There's a couple of other things that, that people have asked for, so I'll come back to you. What's your name, sorry?
Rabia.
Rabia, what do you say to her?
Yeah, so in terms of the mortgage, I mean, I was looking at an interview with the representative.
How do you help Rabia particularly? She's there.
No, absolutely,
she could vote for you. Maybe you have already.
Let me try and explain it. So the representative from the UK Finance, who represents lenders, was speaking just yesterday, and he was saying the fact that there are still more mortgage products now than there were 10 years ago, despite the reduction. So there's still money around. But you're right. No, absolutely, you're right. That what you're finding at the moment, and the mortgage lender, a gentleman over here was chatting before about the constraints. What we found, if you go back 2.5 years to the beginning of COVID, when we started lockdown there, lots of businesses were scrabbling around with furlough, not sure what to do with paying other people. Those first few weeks were really, really difficult as businesses tried to find the certainty that Karan Bilimoria was talking about.
In fairness, that was caused by a pandemic, as opposed to what happened on Friday.
But what I'm saying is it's the uncertainty. So we talked a lot earlier on about how the markets and what have you are trying to get through this and work out what's happening. Yeah. And that's the certainty we want to give is through, first of all, communicating far better, far clearer. But secondly,
come on, Paul. The answer is not to tell Rabia she's basically wrong. I mean, if you just communicate it better.
No, I didn't say she was. I didn't at all. I'm trying to make sure that actually we can settle down the lending market to make sure that she gets a better deal.
Okay. I'll tell you what, Richard. Wait.
But I can't go into an individual circumstance clearly. But I would like to.
So, Rabia, what's your response to that?
I mean, I know I'm not getting a better deal, and also in terms of more offers being valid. So I was given like 4 different offers, sort of with different interest rates. None of them are now available.
Wow.
Do you feel like this mini budget has had a very big impact on your life?
On me personally, as an individual, yes. As someone who was looking to get a house, yes.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that?
I'll have a go instead.
I come back to it. Yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
So Paul says with some relief on his face.
No, happy to.
There is a real paradox here. I mean, one of the things that you could have been arguing about tonight on the panel was a cut in stamp duty. I mean, the government did want to help, did want to sort of free up and take off the edge of something what's effectively a tax on moving and on the housing market. But this clearly, and we just heard it from Rabia, these circumstances so outweigh any gains. And this is what perplexes me so much about the fiscal event. And there's the idea that the government should now intervene more to sort out a situation which it kicked off. I mean, I think people out there will be thinking, please don't intervene anymore. You know? It's like, whatever you do, just don't intervene. And that is a real problem for a party of home ownership. And the aspirational note that the Conservatives have struck successfully for many years, and sometimes where Labour had mixed messages. I think they're really in danger of losing it on this issue. It is obviously specific examples we heard from the audience, but also that generally, if you associate the Conservatives with problems with your mortgage, well, I mean, you know, I'm not a marketing genius like Karen here, but I wouldn't say that's a particular.
But yet, their objective, the objective of what you're trying to do, to generate growth, which will then generate jobs, which will then generate taxes, which will then pay down the debt, is a good objective to have.
It is, but the timelines don't work, Karen.
Exactly.
I mean, their timelines seem to me to be so far out joint, and I will shut up on
But
this.
I just do think
that we now have a situation where you have all of the pain, and it appeared that this was not, and I don't know if you feel it was, but it wasn't even factored in by the Prime Minister and the Chancellor.
But the ultimate way of actually sorting out Jamie's original question, which, as Bridget says, is to build more houses. Now, so investment zones have got a really important place to actually unlock some of the building that is around but not happening, including 12,000 just around near in Bolton. I was down in Ebbsfleet where there's 15,000 on. We need to get on and build, frankly.
Now, I'm very conscious that everything we're hearing from you is very critical of what the government has done on Friday. And I also know that there are more of you have voted Conservative than have voted for any other single party. So just, you know, I want to hear all views. And I don't know so far, of those of you who've spoken, if you're Labour supporters or you're in the don't know category or what you are. But I'd really like to, just in case I haven't already, so I can't tell, I'd like to hear from any Conservative voters.
All the hands went down.
So you've had your hand up. So you're a Conservative voter. So tell me your experience and what
I was at the last election. I don't.
Hang on. So are you now thinking you won't be at the coming election?
I don't know.
Okay. So you were a Conservative voter, and now you don't know. OK, but sorry, tell us your story.
Well, just the fact that in the last 10 years, the government have kept going on about affordable housing, making housing affordable. I don't understand why, in the first place, you haven't changed the building regs so that all houses are faced with a south-facing roof, so that they are fitted with solar panels. And if you want heat exchangers, why they're not? You don't get the developers to put the heat exchangers in. At their cost, that can be spanned out over the entire length of the mortgage as part and parcel of the house.
So you're talking about trying to introduce green energy-saving
but making housing
mechanisms
affordable.
as part of the house.
If 10 years ago the government had said, right, we're changing the building regs, all houses now, new builds have to have PV panels, maybe a small turbine or something, or heat exchangers, whatever you want to do, why aren't they simply doing it so that it's on the new builds? It'll add 20 grand to the cost of the house, which is neither here nor there, but gets paid back over the 25 years of a mortgage. And quite simply, people will save enough money to be able to pay towards their mortgage.
And let's hear from the man at the back. Yes, you've got a microphone hanging in the dark jacket, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Conservative voter, and I think it does become a little bit embarrassing, to be honest. We seem to go from one disaster to the next, and as much as you look at the policies and individually, I think a lot of the policies that were mentioned in the mini-budget are pretty good and will help with growth. But I think the timing is horrendous, coming off the back of the pandemic. And then we have something which shocks the markets. And clearly, you know, there was no OBR data to support it. And here we are now, week on, with a lot of problems to face.
OK, and the man in the white shirt right in the middle at the back.
You said that the Conservatives are a party of home ownership and you want to build more homes, but people simply aren't going to be able to either get the mortgage to move into the home or even remortgage as well. In Manchester, there's been homelessness, which has been dealt with by Andy Benham really well, homelessness funds. It's a really real concern that people, 2-3 years' time when they're remortgaging, they're not going to be able to afford it and there's homelessness. Have you got any plans for that, to deal with that?
Right, now, Paul, I'm aware that there's a slew of questions that have come your way, and I want to give you a chance. Shall I just... You're going to have to touch across all. I'm just going to remind you what they are, because it's unfair to expect you to remember. So you talked about cladding and wanting help with cladding, which has been an issue that's been going on for some considerable time. You mentioned how any money you're saving in energy, you're actually going to be paying more in other costs as well. And then you were talking about, you know, heat exchange pumps, solar panels. Could that not be something that's put into the cost of the house right at the very beginning? You can pay it out over the long term. So that's three pretty wide-ranging things. But I just wonder if you,
So
just to be fair, I just want to give you the chance.
No, it's fine. Yeah, because I'm really glad you asked about the cladding, because I'm 2 weeks into.
Cladding over here.
Sorry,
yeah.
it's over here. So I'm 2 weeks into the job minister for building safety. So it's something that I'm absolutely leaning in. How we deal with what has happened over the last few months, the work that we've done around the Building Safety Act. One of which is looking at this insurance. And the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, has actually just this week released a report where they've been looking at this, where they've exposed some really terrible practice, whereas agents are demanding commissions, kickbacks from the insurance companies before they actually place their insurance with them, and these kind of things, which actually then just ratchets up the insurance. So I would be responding to that ASAP, because that's absolutely outrageous.
And you're facing a bill of what, 250
yeah,
grand?
Yeah, this lady here.
So it needs to be pretty quick for you.
So if you can write to your MP and then get them to write me a letter, I will happily look at your
maybe she
individual
could talk
case.
to you directly afterwards.
I'll be here. I'll be here. But can I just tackle two of the others?
Of course.
So in terms of the South Facing, yeah, I mean, again, I was business minister. I wasn't dealing with net zero directly, but we have to do. We can't just jettison net zero. We have to factor that right into everything we're doing across government, but including house building, because we know that we have to change the way that that we are building, that we are approaching energy, so that we can have local energy generation. The other thing I wanted to tackle was in terms of how you get a mortgage.
This woman's point here, which is you're saying that anything that you've had help with in terms of cheaper energy bills relative to what was to come, as opposed to what was before, you worry it's going to be swallowed up by the higher cost of everything else.
Well, I think the thing is with interest rates. Interest rates are there for the Bank of England to deal with. It's their one lever monetary policy that they have.
They don't affect market. The market rate is a different thing. They've got the Bank of England interest rates, and what we're seeing is the market, and that's what the mortgages are being.
No, absolutely. But there are a number of people that have got fixed rates that will. I think my partner's fixed rate she's in for another 18 months, so she's insulated at the moment, another year, so she's insulated for the moment, but we don't know what's going to happen next year. But there's lots of people renewing their fixed rates now. There's people like this lady here that's just trying to take out a new mortgage, and I understand the situation that you're finding yourself in. It's not our lever, it's the Bank of England have their independence to sell to.
But it's not the Bank of England. Sorry,
it's not the Bank of England.
It's market rate.
But
it's two different things.
We heard from Karan Bilimoria earlier on the fact that interest rates were due to go up. I mean, okay, fine.
Not so
you
suddenly.
made the point about the sudden, but nonetheless, they would be going up to tackle that underlying inflation rate, because their target is 2%. One of the things we're also doing.
But you see, if Rabia there had managed to get her mortgage and got a fixed rate mortgage, you'd be sitting pretty now.
But I'm coming back to I come back to your situation. Try again over the next couple of weeks. Come back to the foothills of COVID, when businesses were really uncertain at that point. They are going through that same level of uncertainty now. So as mortgage products will start to get reintroduced to the market, as those lenders understand the backdrop of what they're facing. But one of the things that we're also doing for other people, maybe even Jamie, is actually Liz Truss talked a lot over the summer about letting people use their rent payments to show that they're good payers, to then make it easier for them to get a mortgage.
But Paul, you haven't you've been in power now for 12 years. So all of this, these are not new problems that we're talking about.
No, it's not. And look, I responded to the debate on about 2 years ago. It's actually something that John Bird, the founder of the Big Issue, first raised that I noticed.
Look, it's just right.
Liz Truss, as the new Prime Minister and a new Chancellor, have said that's what they're going to tackle.
I would like to take another question, if I may, which is from Dave. Dave Hebron, where? Oh, there you are. Off you go.
Good evening. Can Keir Starmer make good on all his promises from the Labour conference? And more importantly, who is going to end up paying for it?
So what's your feeling, Dave? I kind of get a sense of what it might be from that question, but what's your feeling?
My feeling is that at the conference, he's obviously panned into the faithful and everything else. And it's easy to make promises when you're in opposition. It's a lot more difficult to actually make them work and come up with firm plans for the future.
All right. So, Bridget, let's come to you now. So, I mean, we've got Labour's plans. I mean, you've got the Institute for Fiscal Studies saying, as I'm sure you know this, that Labour's plans would only reverse half of the 45 billion in tax cuts that have been announced this week. So you'd still have to find 22.5 billion. And the windfall tax at the moment only raises 5 billion. So there's still a lot of money to find. And you've made a lot of pledges.
So it is right that governments borrow to invest for the long term. So where it comes to that change we need to see around climate change, it is right that we use government money to create jobs to support business, not for unfunded short-term measures like cutting the high rate of tax. I don't think that's a responsible approach. Being government does involve difficult choices and it does involve priorities, and Keir Starmer was very clear about that this week at Labour Party conference. But to give one example of the ideas that we've been setting out, all of them, by the way, with a full plan behind them as to how we fund them and all costed. I know that childcare is a really big concern.
Hang on, unless I've missed something, which I may have done, forgive me, because it has been quite a few days. I haven't heard Keir Starmer say how he's going to pay for all of it exactly. I have heard him say, we don't know what we'll inherit, and I can see the sense in that, and therefore, you know, it's kind of impossible to quantify, but I haven't heard him say how much it's going to be and how he's going to pay for it.
So we wouldn't be cutting corporation tax. We would do away with non-dom tax status. We wouldn't have the 45 rate cut either. But
that's not going to pay.
No, but corporation tax, not putting forward a tax cut around corporation tax is a big thing. I would say that where it comes to every area where we set out policy, everything that we set out has a plan behind it for how we pay for it. So to take childcare, for example, it's a real pressure that families face right now. But actually, if we're going to talk about growth, you can't talk about growing your economy unless you've got a decent childcare system that supports parents into work. And right now, it doesn't. It costs a fortune and parents can't access it. That's why I set out this week at Labour Party conference that we want to make sure that all children are in England at primary school are able to have a breakfast club so that parents can get to work, that they, not women in particular, are not having to give up jobs they love or cut back on their hours because they can't get to work on time.
And are you going to pay for that through more borrowing?
We would pay for that by reversing the 45p rate, the higher rate of tax. We wouldn't press ahead with
that. And so how much is that going to raise for you?
It costs £365 million a year to deliver breakfast clubs for all children in primary school in England.
I genuinely don't know the answer. How much would cutting the 45p?
2 billion.
It's about 2 billion.
So that's not enough then?
That's not enough. What you want to fund with it though, Bridget?
Alongside with...
breakfast clubs, yes.
Yes,
a million, I suppose, forgive me.
So the main point here is that a Labour government has to be business friendly. And I've seen this particular in opposition, Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer, they are genuinely trying to be business friendly. Tony Blair's government was very business friendly. One of the main reasons Boris Johnson won an 80-seat majority was he was up against Jeremy Corbyn, and business did not see Jeremy Corbyn as being business friendly at all. So if Keir Starmer can be business friendly, which I think he is, then I think there's a lot of hope. If he wants to invest in research and development, we only invest 1.7% of GDP. America, Germany, 3.1%, 3.2%. That's what's going to generate, that we're talking about climate change. Houses, 28 million houses out of 29 million houses in this country are not up to the standard. We need to have them insulated. We need to have hydrogen heating eventually, heat pumps. All that creates jobs. And that's what he's got to be talking about. But here's one point I want to make about Keir Starmer that's really important. I've got to know him. I think he's a thoroughly decent man. And he's somebody who's got a hugely accomplished career, not just as a KC now, but as Director of Public Prosecutions. But here's what I respected about him. In Partygate, he said, if I'm found guilty, I will resign. Yeah. Which other politician said that?
Burst the bubble too much on the Labour love here, but I think what we're not talking seriously about here, and Labour's had a very good conference this week. I thought Rachel Reeves, as Shadow Chancellor, gets a lot of credit from me about her very calm approach. And yes, there is a seriousness about business and about wielding power, and it may come sooner rather than later to Labour, so we need to take it seriously. Where there is a big empty space is around growth. And even tonight, what I've heard about how Labour would drive growth is not really at the moment, and it's early days, but those days are passing fast. We need to hear more about what the growth recipe would be. And it's absolutely right to talk about women being able to get to work, Bridget, not being able to find childcare. Obviously, that's also one for the men around the house too, let's be honest. But, you know, it does keep women out of the workforce disproportionately. I understand this, but that is not in itself enough. If you're talking about research and development, well, the last thing I heard from a Labour front bencher at conference at the weekend was slightly talking down Cambridge because it was a prosperous southern hub for technology and innovation and life sciences, and sort of playing the south off against the north and saying we'll put the money into levelling up in the north. I think that is, in a way, a dangerous narrative. The UK has got a real fight on its hands in competition and in growth. And at the moment, Labour can profit from the Tories' woes, absolutely understood, fair play, but that will not itself be a recipe for growth. And sooner or later, you're going to have to think much more about what you want to really do to power the UK forward.
The man in the back in the blue sweater.
I don't think that oppositions win elections, governments lose them, and this government has already lost. And we all know that. In 2 years' time, you will lose the election.
The man in the white sweatshirt, yeah.
So, I personally feel like since electing Boris Johnson up to now, it's been a nightmare that's just never come to an end. With people always used to say, what's the alternative? What's Labour got to offer? Where is it? You know, where's Labour's plans? We've heard it this week. You've clearly seen it in terms of what the public think, in terms of the polling. I personally feel that this is a new start for Labour. It's a reset button. And I will give my vote to Labour this time coming, the next general election.
And did you give it to them last time?
No.
Okay,
and
so
I
you're
regret
switching.
it. I regret it.
I do.
Okay, and the woman there with the brown hair and the black top, I think, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, the conversation is all about growth and building growth, but I feel the biggest thing we did against growth was come out of the single market. So I'd like to hear about, you know, Labour's view on that and how, you know, we've cut ties with our free trade with you know, the EU, so that's has had a massive impact on that. So I'd just like to hear your views, Bridget, on that and how Labour would build relationships back.
We'll obviously address that, but there's also a broader point, which is that whichever side of the fence you sit on, you don't want the same party in government in perpetuity, and it has now been 12 years. And you reference there, which is a long time, and you reference there that governments tend to lose rather than opposition win. And there was a poll that came out today, and we can really see what the public thinks to what happened last Friday. And we can see a few of you here today saying, oh, I voted Tory last time, but probably not next time. And this poll by the Times and YouGov has given Labour a 33-point lead. Now, I know that's only a moment in time, but it feels like a moment nonetheless. A site called Electoral Maps UK said that would project to a 346-seat majority to the Labour Party.
I mean, you have to be very careful with one poll and projecting.
But nonetheless, I 100% agree with you, but it still seems like an extraordinary reaction to what happened last Friday. I mean, Liz Truss could go down in history as the person who wiped out the Conservatives.
Oh, look, that's always...
Cool. So look, let me remind you, can Keir Starmer make good on all the promises he made in his conference speech, and more importantly, who's going to end up paying for it?
You know, I've heard this in '97. I've heard it for you know, when the Conservatives are going to get wiped out and disappear. I've heard it in the early 2000s. You know, when Jeremy Corbyn came out, the Labour Party going to get wiped out. It doesn't really happen. But you know, the fact of the moment is elections, and we've got 2 years. Obviously, we're a government in a hurry to deliver. But in terms of the alternative, you know, what we've heard today, we've heard, you know, we've reversed the national insurance levy. The Labour Party were in favour of that 6 months ago. Now they're against it because they're using the polar opposite argument. They've talked about the windfall tax, and Bridget has talked about all this money that oil and gas companies are making. The one that's still cited now, even though it's proved to be false, is £170 billion. That's the global profits of every single oil and gas company. We're not going to go to America, to Canada, to Bangladesh and say, can we have your
But can
your
you
tax,
justify
can
the
we have your
principle?
tax
Can you
please?
really justify
because
the
the Labour
principle
Party
of that?
can't quite get their maths right.
So people here pay for it so the oil and gas companies can make a profit, a massive profit.
We have the energy.
I was going to say, you already do have a windfall tax.
We have the energy levy still in place. What it does slightly differently from what the Labour Party proposed was that it rewards the fact that if energy companies invest now, then they don't have to pay that levy because they have to only pay 10% of it. Because we want to move medium term away from fossil fuels, the net zero that we were talking about. But I do agree with Bridget about childcare, because that is a real drag on people staying in careers, in employment, and female, predominantly
Who's been in charge of that for 12 years, Paul? I mean, come on.
This is one of the 6 pillars that the Chancellor was talking about, that he's going to have
But the ladies,
plans for growth.
the question about the EU has not been answered.
Do you know what? I'm just about to come to that, but thank you so much for reminding me. I'm on it. No, but Karen, I'm going to ask Bridget, because the question was actually to Bridget, in fairness. So what you wanted to know is what the Labour policy is towards a single market. Labour's been quite clear. You're not going back into EU. You're not trying to take us back into EU. But what about the single market?
Well, that's not what we're putting forward. I mean, I voted Remain back in 2016. I wanted us to stay in the European Union. I campaigned for that. That's not where we are. We've left the European Union. I think there are real challenges right now where it comes to the Northern Ireland Protocol, as Karen was talking about, and problems around the Brexit deal. So there are problems, there are areas that we do absolutely need to fix those gaps in the deal, but I don't think there's a great appetite at the moment for that kind of approach.
Let's go back to Dave, because you asked this question. Have you been, Dave there in the blue jacket, have you been convinced by anything that you've heard?
Not really, no. I keep hearing it from Labour, what they're going to do, but they've never really got proper answer for everything.
Do you think Keir would be a good PM?
Either you said that with your mouth shut or someone else answered that. Right, we've got about 3 minutes. Let's take one more question. This has been a very serious business, and quite rightly too, because this is a very serious time. There were a number of people asking about this, so I just want to see what you have to say about it, just in the 3 minutes we've got left. Dominic Wilkinson.
Manchester was unfortunately beaten from hosting the Eurovision Song Contest next year. Which city do you think should host on behalf of Ukraine? Liverpool or Glasgow?
OK. Put your money where your mouth is. What do you think?
I would say Liverpool. It's only down the road, and that's where my other half lives, so...
Not in any sense biased.
Yeah.
Come on, Karen.
No, I didn't hear the question.
It's about the Eurovision Song Contest. So it's now been whittled down to Liverpool or Glasgow, because, you know, we're hosting instead of Ukraine. Which should it be, Liverpool or Glasgow?
I love both cities.
Oh, no, come on, get off our bed, Karen.
I was in Glasgow for COP26. I spent 1.5 out of the 2 weeks there, and I love the city.
Oh, OK.
So I've just had a brilliant week at Labour Party conference in Liverpool. Fantastic city, but my granddad grew up in Glasgow, so Glasgow's got a special place in my heart.
Right. Oh, my gosh, OK.
Liverpool's got the pedigree for singing. They've got to check that actually whether they want it, because cities tend to lose money when they actually host.
Yes. Well, they're saying they want it.
But they're 45% reliant on hospitality and tourism, so they've got the infrastructure as well. I was up there not that long ago.
Well, Liverpool not only has a reputation for singing, it has a reputation for creating the greatest band of all time with the greatest catalogue of music in history. That said, whichever...
Don't forget the Manchester sound. I'm not comparing the Beatles with Manchester
sound.
That's fantastic.
It's Liverpool or Glasgow.
OK, that's true. But I'm just saying, because we're here.
It is in, I won't be seeing it, but my vote would be Liverpool.
Ooh, I've always just gone with the local, with the vibe wherever I am for this show. So this is within the Northwest. I realise it's not much variety for you, Fiona. I'm tempted to say Liverpool, Glasgow. No, my real answer is I'm a Durham girl. I'm taking it to Durham, all by myself.
Oh, my God, OK. The man at the back in the stripy shirt.
I think we shouldn't forget that we're hosting this for Ukraine. And
absolutely. Yeah.
Manchester has the largest Ukrainian population outside of London, so it was
sadly,
a real
as
shame
Richard
that it
pointed out,
wasn't
sadly you are no longer in the running, so
Yeah,
I'm sorry about that. The woman in the front here in the orange trousers.
Well, I'm a Glaswegian. And I love Liverpool. And I always say that Scousers are Glaswegians with funny accents, so I don't think it makes any difference at all which one they typically
I wish
choose.
Birling was in the offing, because he did such a great job with the Commonwealth Games. Wasn't it brilliant?
Oh, what about the woman here in the front in the glasses?
Well, if Liverpool get it, it'll just be another thing that we'll never hear the end of, so I've got to say Glasgow.
Oh, my God. And briefly, yes, the man here in the front.
Glasgow.
Glasgow. Any reason in particular, other than your accent?
I'm from Glasgow.
You're from Glasgow. Okay, fair enough.
To the point.
I thought that was the case. Well, look, I just want to cheer us up slightly, apart from anything else, because it's been fascinating to hear what you've had to say and your stories. And Rabia, I wish you luck with your mortgage application. Our time is up. Thank you very much to the panel for coming on this evening. Thank you to all of you for being here and being such a great audience, putting all your points. And, of course, thank you to you at home for watching. Don't forget, next week we're in London. We have Brian Cox from Succession, if you're a fan of that. It's also been lots of other things as well. And Piers Morgan. It should be quite a programme. Make sure you watch it. From Question Time. Bye-bye.